What's poppin', my gooners? So for this video we have Daddy Crane going up against the guy who likes them young. Yes, I am speaking of Waltz. Now, of course I know that's not what Waltz did to Aiden and the others, but it could be argued that he did worse. Anywho, in this video I'll be using multiple different versions of Crane to see how he deal with Waltz. I want you to keep in mind this video is supposed to be fun, so don't take anything too seriously. And oh boy, I have a feeling this video is going to make a lot of people pissed off. Technically speaking, I already have a video where Crane fights Waltz, but I didn't go much into detail as that video was more about seeing if Crane could survive Dying Light 2. So for this video, I'll be using 3 different Cranes. Each one will be from a different timeline to see how Crane would fare up against Waltz. The 3 Cranes will be beginning Crane, the Crane that went up against the Mother, and finally the Alpha, the Sigma, the Beast himself, endgame Beast Crane. Why have 3 different Cranes? Well, I want to see how long it would take Crane to actually beat Waltz and what point in time he would be too strong for Waltz to handle. Now for a video like this, where characters have never gone up against each other, the best way to determine their strength is by using other characters for comparison. So we'll be using the Mother and Aiden to help us establish a baseline of power. Without further ado, let's dive deep balls into Waltz. We know for a time Waltz experimented on children. I'm assuming he got far with his research, as we can see was Aiden, but he never reached for what he was achieving. So after he lost the children, he kept on experimenting, but this time on himself and renegades. More than likely he wasn't able to replicate what he did to Aiden, but it does appear to have made himself significantly stronger than your average Joe. Whatever he did do to himself did have some major weaknesses and caveats. For starters, UV lights do seem to hurt him, or at least Aiden used it to make him back off. And then it appears he can't fully control the virus. At times, the primal rage of the virus takes over his mind. We saw a couple times as he became a raging beast that chased down Aiden. But if you truly consider it, these cons aren't necessarily too bad. The amount of strength he gets in return is most definitely worth becoming a mindless beast from time to time. But just how strong did Waltz make himself? Very good question. Similar to Aiden, Waltz has the capabilities of taking the inhibitors to make himself even stronger. So to the amount of power he could have reached will never be known. All we can do is go based on everything we saw him do before his final fight against Aiden. This will set a baseline for his natural strength. Now let's see some of the notable strength feats he presented throughout the story. When he fought Ader and his group, he proceeded to break them with ease. A hit or 2 from him was more than enough to kill these guys. He even used Ader like a ragdoll and launched him towards Aiden. The blow was strong enough to knock him to the ground. I know, right? Aiden is a little bitch. Aiden then proceeds to go rawr rawr, and then Waltz teaches him who's daddy. And honestly, I couldn't have said it better than Waltz. He proceeds to tell Aiden that he's just a precious little boy, and wham! He whacks him with a baton. Some funny shit in all seriousness. A little while later, after Waltz is done having a temper tantrum, he yeets Aiden from a far distance. It's pretty impressive if you actually think about it. Also, when Aiden and Waltz were fighting after Aiden killed Veronica, they both got blasted by a missile and survived. So what about Waltz's final fight? Well, in his base without the inhibitors to boost him yet, he can unleash some devastating attacks and combos. He can cause shockwaves by pounding the ground, and also he can swirl around. Also, his durability is crazy strong, allowing him to shrug off most attacks. After taking some damage, the veins in his arms begin to glow a deep orange. He becomes more vicious and starts running around the arena. He's actually strong enough to launch concrete at Aiden like demolishers. And keep in mind, this is all before he starts taking inhibitors like candy. And another major thing to point out is that during this time, he still retains his mind and isn't fully consumed by the virus. This allows him to fight strategically, waiting for the perfect time to strike and unleash lethal combos of attacks. Once he takes an inhibitor, it seems that it restores some of his health. The inhibitor seems to bolster his physical capabilities, allowing him to jump great distances. Also, another thing I forgot to mentioned, but Waltz does have the ability to block. With his hands, but it's still blocking. And then finally for Waltz's last ditch effort, he injects himself with 3 different inhibitors. With this, Waltz rages and goes feral. However, instead of launching an attack, he chooses to run at first. Now here's the fun part, there can be a debate whether Waltz boosted by 1 inhibitor is stronger than the Waltz boosted by like 3 inhibitors. The reason why I say this is because one of them allows him to keep his mind, which in turn allows him to fight strategically, while the other just makes him go mad. Also in his final form, Waltz gets packed by Aiden rather quickly. Of course, this could just mean that Aiden's beast form is just that much significantly stronger than Waltz, because prior to this moment, Aiden was fighting Waltz in his human form. But I guess we can just say that the pinnacle of Waltz's strength is when he takes all those inhibitors. Alright, so this is it for Waltz. The guy by all rights is a menace. I do feel like people tend to downplay him as they don't really like Dying Light 2, but under no circumstances is Waltz weak. He is most definitely in the top 10 strongest characters in Dying Light. But alright, we can start to see how Crane would fare up against Waltz. Okay, so we obviously have to bend time to have these guys to go up against each other. Initially, I wanted this fight to be between the opening scene Crane versus Waltz. However, this isn't even fair since at this point Crane has no knowledge whatsoever about the infected and barely has any gear. So to give Crane a little advantage, let's say he fights Waltz after the whole arena fight was the Demolisher and waking up next to Brecken, so I guess mid-game Crane. So truthfully speaking, I honestly don't think Crane can do jack at this point. The only thing that gives Crane an advantage over Waltz are his guns. However, we know Waltz has high levels of durability and I don't think Crane would be able to kill him quick enough. Crane does have a bunch of skills at this point, and I mean he did go toe to toe with a Demolisher and won. You also gotta keep in mind though, Aiden also had a cutscene and fought a Demolisher and won. And even still, Waltz wiped his sweaty balls using Aiden's face. Crane may be strong, but up to this point, I believe what gives Waltz the win is the fact he can use his mind. He isn't a berserker like the Demolisher, and we've also seen how quickly Waltz is able to overwhelm people. Even Aiden, who has been altered and is physically much stronger than your normal human, was getting manhandled by Waltz. And I don't even think Waltz would require any inhibitors to win. You could make an argument that endgame Dying Light Crane would have a better chance of winning, but like I said, the only thing at this point that gives Crane the win are his guns, but that might not even be enough. So beginning Crane, or more specifically mid-game Crane, loses to Waltz. And I sincerely believe endgame Dying Light Crane would lose to Waltz. But some people might not like to hear that. But hey, you can convince me otherwise by giving your reasoning and facts in the comments. Alright, now we get to see how the Crane that went up against the Mother would fare up against Waltz. I do believe the large gap between their powers has relatively been closed. Not only has Crane gotten stronger, he has also gotten more experience during this time. For this fight, let's say Crane still consumed the blue serum. I know in the original the Mother forced him to drink it, so we're just gonna have to use our imagination. Let's say as soon as the Mother forced Crane to drink the serum, she and Waltz swapped places, so who would win? And of course, remember, we have to bend time for this to even work. Well, like I said before, to set a baseline of power, we're gonna have to use other characters. And the perfect character for this job is the Mother. To determine whether Crane could win against Waltz, we have to see how the Mother and Waltz compare. You know, I'm just one gooner with a humble opinion, and I figured some people might disagree with my opinions. So I decided to draw from the collective knowledge of this community. And I was surprised that the general opinion was kinda even. I won't go into much detail about who is stronger because my next video will be the Mother versus Waltz, but for this video I can comfortably say Waltz is stronger. Does that mean Waltz can beat her? Well, that's a separate question. And it's honestly baffling how the community is divided between who is stronger overall. But for the sake of argument, I'm going to say Waltz, boosted by all the inhibitors, is stronger than the Mother. In my next video, I will go into full detail and compare both characters. But for this video, I'ma say Waltz is stronger, and if you don't like that, well, twinkle twinkle little bitch, you can go cry to your mother because I don't care. Alright, now that has been determined, let's continue the fight. So during Crane's fight with the Mother, mother, he was actually doing extremely well. In fact, I dare say he was winning. But there were a lot of shenanigans during this fight, like hallucinations and telepathic powers and whatnot. So the true fight begins once the mother jumps down and Crane starts using his beast powers. Of course, these aren't the same beast powers he has in Dying Light the Beast, they differ a little bit. So both Crane and the mother pack a decent punch. Luckily for Crane, he still retains some of his fighting capabilities, like being able to dodge and whatnot. But the major difference between this Crane's powers and the one from the Beast is the fact that this Crane can heal. Yes, I know Beast Crane can heal too, but not to the same extent. If he doesn't take any damage for a few seconds, he begins to restore all his health. At this point in the fight, Crane gains the upper hand and overwhelms the mother. But this isn't to say she isn't strong. I mean, she literally is a sentient volatile. But enough of this. So how would this Crane fare up against Waltz? Well, if his fight against the mother proved anything, is the fact that like Aiden, Crane would possibly be strong enough to fight Waltz, at least without any inhibitor boosting him. And I don't think there's a huge difference between Crane and Aiden at this point. I know Aiden is an enhanced individual, but Crane is just built different. And his guns would close any gap Aiden has over Crane if there's even one to begin with. Anyways, once Waltz injects himself with the first inhibitor, I do believe he would begin to overwhelm Crane at least a bit. But luckily for Crane, that blue serum would begin to work its magic. Once Crane begins to turn, I do believe the fight would turn to his favor. I mean, once Crane's powers kicked in, the mother didn't have much of a chance. I will say the thing that gave the mother a leg up was her stupid annoying scream. Apart from that, she's very easy to beat. I do think Waltz would be forced to use the other inhibitors in the fight. See, I think Waltz would be slightly stronger than Crane before using the other 3 inhibitors. However, Crane would most certainly outlast Waltz. Every time Crane takes damage, all he has to do is back off for a bit and heal up. It would turn into a fight of attrition. And at this point, both men have relative control over their minds, so they aren't necessarily mindless beasts. So Waltz would probably be beaten enough by Crane forcing him to use the other inhibitors. It's just the healing factor would keep Crane in this fight a whole lot longer than Waltz. But with all those inhibitors, Waltz would unleash a new level of devastating power. And this is where I believe the fight can go either way. Waltz in this form does retain some small levels of control over his body, but he kinda just becomes like a mindless volatile. Which at first he runs away and I don't understand why, but whatever. If Crane can keep his cool and fight strategically, he most certainly wins against Waltz. Not only would he be able to strategize, but his healing factor would keep him alive. But the main issue is that Crane also has a timer. Not long after he beat the mother, the virus would begin to take over his mind. And then at this point, Crane's mind would become just as mindless as Waltz. And if I'm being truthful, I do think Waltz is stronger than Crane, at least in terms of strength. And if Crane can't fight strategically, then he won't heal and Waltz could win. So the fight could go either way. Waltz at this point is stronger and there is literally no debate over this. Physically, Waltz is stronger. I'd say Crane can win 5 out of 10 times. It could be less or it could be more, but this is just my opinion. I also don't want to hear anybody saying, "Oh, this guy knows nothing about Dying Light. The mother is obviously stronger than Waltz." Sorry, kitten, that's just your opinion and not a fact. I do like making videos like this, but people just take this too seriously and forget that this is just supposed to be for fun. If you want to say the mother is stronger, that Waltz is stronger, that Crane is stronger, then by all means do. At the end of the day, it's just opinions. Some might even argue, oh, Crane has gone up against the Night Hunter, and the Night Hunter is most definitely stronger than Waltz. Well, only issue is, canonically, Crane has never gone up against a Night Hunter, and even then there's an argument to be made that Waltz is stronger. Could the Night Hunter be stronger? Sure, but irrelevant to this fight because once again, the zombie mode isn't canon. And I know the Night Hunter is canon, but I'm just saying Crane never went up against a Night Hunter. But yeah, for this fight, I believe it's a 50-50, or unless you want to consider plot armor, at which point Crane would win, but that's just bogus and boring. Also, I know Waltz isn't fully a mindless beast, but he isn't all there when he enters his final form. Well, I think everybody knows where this is going. If we believe for a second that endgame the following Crane could possibly beat Waltz, well then this fight would just be a goon massacre. Not only did Crane get stronger from all the experiments done to him by the Baron, but by the end of the Beast, Crane has taken 8 different GSB. Each one of those significantly boosted his power. Not only that, but Crane can do so much more than before. He can actively control when he turns. He can launch things, cause the same shockwaves, run at greater speeds, he can actively heal, and best of all, he can spin like a damn Beyblade. And so much more. Crane has just achieved an entire separate level not really seen before. This was the example I used for my last video. Aiden beat full power Waltz with ease. Then like a year or two later, Aiden, who most definitely got stronger from whatever the Baron did to him, you can literally tell from his muscle mass if you don't believe me, got beaten up by a Crane who was holding back. Although to be fair to Aiden, he must have been really exhausted from running around for days, constantly being harassed by the Baron soldiers. Either way, all this shows is that Crane is most definitely way stronger than Waltz by this point in time. Endgame the following Crane can be argued that he loses or wins against Waltz, but endgame the Beast Crane, yeah, no, there's no argument there. Crane shits on Waltz and Waltz thanks him for it. Simple as that. All the things that gave Waltz the advantage no longer matter because Crane can do them too. Waltz won't even be able to run from Crane. In fact, I'd go as far to say that Crane in his human form might be more than enough to beat Waltz. But I guess it doesn't really matter because if human Crane couldn't beat Waltz, then he'd just enter his beast state. So what's the verdict? Well, beginning slash mid slash endgame Dying Light Crane loses to Waltz. The following endgame Crane is a tie with the win going to either or is just more dependent on the circumstances they find themselves in. And finally, Beast Crane just slaughters Waltz. All of this is just my opinion. I tried being as partial as I could. I tried incorporating facts and feats, but I know some people might not agree. A large part that affects Waltz is the fact that people actively hate him and will automatically just choose their favorite character as the strongest. I hope I was able to entertain you with this video. And if you think I got anything wrong or disagree, don't feel shy to share your opinion. After all, that's all we can do, and that's all this video is, the opinion of one gooner. Like, sub, or don't, as long as you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.